My name is Emma Campolucci and I'm a wellbeing trainer, but I'm also a qualified counsellor, and I'm a counselling lecturer as well. So I do a lot of work with mental health and also promoting listening skills and encouraging people to talk. So that's one of the things that can be really helpful when you're at work, promoting sort of positive mental health at work, just being open to sort of communicate, especially. So these are the things I'm going to be speaking about. We've got about 15 to 20 minutes today. I'm hoping there might be time for questions at the end, but we'll see how we get along. So I'm going to talk about two things. We're going to look at common mental health problems facing people today, and how to look after yourself and that of others as well, and specifically thinking about how we do that at work. So first of all, when we think about positive mental health, this is the reason why we want it, and Mark's already touched on resilience, and that's one of the key things as well, is that it encourages us to be resilient to the stresses that life presents. We can realise our full potential, whatever that looks like, whatever it is that we want to thrive in life. We become resilient to stress, and we can work productively. So whatever it is that we want to engage in work, we're able to focus and concentrate on what we actually want to do. Whereas when we experience mental health issues, we perhaps aren't able to focus. Perhaps we aren't sleeping well. Perhaps our cognitive ability is lesser than. So actually working productively can be quite hard. We make meaningful contributions to our communities, and we've got supportive relationships, personal and professional. So as you see, positive mental health, we know everyone has mental health, but positive mental health, that's on a spectrum. So knowing where we are on that spectrum is very helpful. And I think what I'd like to talk you through, especially, is a model I want to share. And it's really powerful for yourself and others to sort of check in with yourself as to where you are with your mental health. And that's called the human function curve, which is lovely and colourful. I want to talk to you about this because I think it's really important for us to realise where we are when it comes to being productive. And our most productive place is that lovely swirling blue area in the middle, when we're absolutely creative, we're working at our best. So just to explain briefly the chart, so what you've got is the activity on the bottom, so the amount of things we're actually doing in our life. And on the left, you've got your performance, so actually what you're producing. So as you can see, that lovely creative area in the middle, we're actually working at our peak. And some people might associate that almost with like a flow state, where you're doing really good work, you're engaged in it, you're enjoying it, you feel you've got purpose, value, it has meaning, all those great things that Mark's just spoken about. So what can happen is that we sometimes go the wrong side of the curve. Now, before we move that side, let's just look a little bit on the lovely side, which is where we've got this lovely healthy tension, where we've got some good things going on in life. So if we think about things that we need to stay in that lovely central zone, the indicators would be we are sleeping well, we are eating well. That doesn't mean we can't have the odd takeaway. It just means that we're looking after our diet. We're drinking well. And again, that doesn't mean that we can't have alcohol. It just means that we're enjoying it as opposed to needing it to get through the day. It's a very different thing. Also, what will be going on as an indicator on that side of the curve is we'll be exercising. We'll be looking after our bodies. It'll be a feature of our routine. We'll also be working with others. We'll be being supported by others. We'll be social. So we'll be seeing friends and family. And also we'll be engaging in hobbies and interests. So we'll have a very balanced life. We'll be working really well, but we'll also have that tension of having a life outside of work. Now, the challenges happen when you're the wrong side of the curve. And what can happen there is that we don't actually realise when we've gone past that point. So that's where it says intended performance on the top, is that we think we're still okay. We don't realise that as human beings, there's a point where actually we can't do much more. We've reached our point where we've given so much of ourselves that we're actually not able to keep delivering. So for those of you in work, you will either notice it in yourselves or others. People start forgetting things, or they start making mistakes. And if you start noticing that, and that's uncharacteristic of people around you, oh, I forgot to do that report. Oh, I didn't see that email. I haven't done this. And there are mistakes that are going on. Mistakes and cognitive ability starts to fail as you go past that center point. So your actual performance comes down because you're getting things wrong, because you can't keep thinking at that level. So what you might find then is if people keep carrying on doing that high level of activity, they can then reach the panic zone. And that's where people may end up sitting with their manager or in HR and going, do you know what, I just can't keep doing this. You know, it's affecting me in lots of ways. Now, the challenge for us is to start tuning into people, because by people sometimes reach the panic zone, that might be where they come to someone like myself for counselling. But actually, there'll be loads of signs before then. So if as a manager or even as a colleague, you're hearing people say, do you know what, I'm not sleeping well. I've had an extra couple of takeaways. I haven't done exercise this week. My other half took the dog for a walk. I didn't want to go out. I cancelled a few appointments. Literally what you're hearing there is people telling you the things that they should do to keep themselves the right side of the curve. So you'll be hearing people tell you these things. I'm not sleeping well. I just can't, you know, or it can get quite jokey. Things like, I'm just surviving on coffee at the moment. That sort of stuff. And we need to be very mindful and tune into what people are saying, because we can then ask questions and say, are you actually okay? Because you seem like you've got quite a lot on. And actually asking people these questions can help them realise that they're the wrong side of the curve. And also for you, if you happen to be a manager, you can identify that in your colleagues. Because if people don't recognise when they reach that panic zone, or if they don't do anything about that, i.e. reach out to HR, loved ones, friends, they're just literally carrying on down that curve. And that's where we get breakdown, burnout. And it can take a long time for a person to come back from that. That will be either a physical health issue might present, or it will be a serious issue of mental health. So essentially, the way I like to view that chart, it's almost like a credit card. If you keep using a credit card the wrong way, eventually you're going to have to pay the bill. And that's absolutely what will be happening at breakdown, burnout. So it's very important for each of us to recognize where we are on this chart. And I use it with my clients as well and say, so where are you on the curve today? And it can just be a really lovely check-in to go, right, where am I on it at the moment? And I think another thing to say about this chart is it's unique. I mean, it looks beautifully like a bell curve, but actually what stresses me out might not stress somebody else out in the same way. So if you've got colleagues who say, oh, I'm really stressed, I've got 2 reports to do, you might be thinking, well, I've got 5 and I'm not stressed. So the way we experience stress and what we can each handle will be unique. So someone's key creative zone point might actually be in a very different place to others. So when they reach peak performance, might take a lot less time, and what makes them exhausted and stressed will happen far sooner than it perhaps is for you. And so that's very important if you're working in a team, that you don't have those assumptions and judgments. Well, it's just 2 reports, you know, how hard is it? You know, I could do 2 reports. So we need to be mindful of that. So if we think now about some sort of mental health conditions that we might hear. And the reason I wanted to show this chart is to make people aware that anxiety is something that we all experience. Everyday anxiety, there's lots of different things on that chart there that you'll notice that, you know, if we think about the 4th one down, worry about an actual dangerous object, place or situation, well, that's quite common. And actually that links in with our survival. We do need to, each of us, have a level of anxiety at some point to just keep ourselves safe before we enter situations that might be dangerous for us. The challenge is when it goes to the right of there and we start looking at an anxiety disorder. Now, that would only be diagnosed by a psychiatrist or with a GP. But what you'll notice with someone with an anxiety disorder is it will have a serious impact to their daily functioning. They may struggle to get to work. They may struggle to do very basic tasks because their anxiety is having such a big impact. And one thing I did want to point out on there is the 1/5 one down on the anxiety disorder, some people performing uncontrollable repetitive actions. Now, we would know that as OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder. And I think one of the things we can do with regards to promoting positive mental health in the workplace is to think about the narrative and the way we speak about mental health conditions. So I've heard people say, I'm a bit OCD, I like to have a clean desk. And this is unhelpful. Or I've got a friend who says, my cleaner is a bit OCD, it's great. Whoa, what we need to do is break that title down. O, which means obsessive. So these are thoughts. So before anyone performs any actions, there are thoughts. And the actions are as a result of trying to get rid of the thoughts. So many people's lives are seriously impacted by OCD. So we need to be careful of how we talk about some of these conditions. And if we look at the final one about recurring nightmares, flashbacks, we might know that as PTSD. So post-traumatic stress disorder. And you might think, well, PTSD, that's just soldiers get that. But actually, people can experience PTSD after a car accident, even after a traumatic birth, childhood issues, or even surviving a serious accident. So what's important there is that actually, when it comes to different mental health conditions and someone sharing those with us, it can be useful to go, do you know what, I don't know a lot about it. If it's a member of your team, maybe I'll just do a little bit of research on it. And my final slide has got some great resources if you want to know more about some of these bigger conditions. So depression, here we've just literally talked about fear, and now we're talking about, sadness, which are the big emotions. I mean, Mark touched on some emotions previously, but getting into it a little bit deeper now, depression, again, we need to think about how we talk about that. So when someone says, I'm feeling a bit depressed, okay, so when we talk about clinical depression, that's someone who's felt depressed for at least 21 days. There is none of this. There is no up and down. So as Mark was sharing, our emotions are up and down. We can't always be skipping through fields thinking about unicorns each day. We do have down days, and that's okay. But when we have continuous down days for lengths of time, that might be where we need to reach out for support. And there's lots of different experiences that we can have with depression. And I think one of the most challenging ones, as you'll see on the list on the right, is feeling anxious, because sadly, depression and anxiety are friends. You can experience them at exactly the same time. So when people are depressed, they get anxious about the fact that they're always depressed. And when someone's feeling depressed, it can work in a comorbid way. So if someone's experiencing them both at the same time, that's a real double whammy to sort of be working with, and just trying to be productive at work when you may be overthinking, when you're feeling really low, really heavy. And also, I think the final point there about sort of suicidal thoughts, these are things that if someone shares dark thoughts with us, I just don't see the point. What's the point in going on? I think it's really important for us not to dismiss that and dress it up. Oh, just go and have a cup of tea, you'll be fine. Just go and, it'll be fine in the morning. That's sort of, again, that narrative around it. So whenever anyone shares anything like that with us, it's really important to not dismiss it. I'm hearing you say this, tell me more. So using those open questions to get someone to talk about some of these things. Okay, so stress, we've spoken a little bit about it with the human function curve, and how when we're the wrong side of the curve, we can experience stress. And I think most of us would have experienced this at some point. And you might even think, if you visualize that curve, what did it feel like when I was stressed and I was the wrong side versus when I feel really good? So knowing and that self-awareness can be useful. So rather than reading all that whole slide there, I think the first bullet point is really important. So people feel little stress when they have the time, experience and resources to manage a situation. A person will feel a lot of stress when they think they cannot handle the demands placed on them. So when they're the wrong side of the curve and they're in this continual stream of having work given to them over and over, it will become really difficult for them to cope. So stress, as I've said, is not inevitable of an event. It can depend on your perception of a situation and your ability to deal with it. And again, that comes back to us being unique and what each of us can handle. So supporting others. So this is what we can do, especially in the workplace or even further than that in our own lives. Listen empathetically. So it's absolutely vital, as people might feel stigma when sharing mental health issues. I think we've come a long way when it comes to mental health. You know, people are sharing more, they're talking more about it, but actually there is still some concern about it. And I think some of the clients that I see still say, no one knows I'm in counselling, I don't want anyone to know. So there's still that concern about people being aware of that. So discussing mental health issues can be sensitive, so be mindful of where you have those conversations. And I think that's been tricky during COVID because people are in their own homes and they're at work. So having conversations with members of your team or staff can be quite hard to find out really how somebody is. So how do you feel about talking about yourself online, on Zoom or whatever application you're using? It might help people. Some people it helps. Some people it's a barrier. So avoiding over questioning people. People can feel interrogated, you know. So what happened then? Then what did you say? And who said that? If you've got a member of staff with anxiety, over questioning can feel quite overwhelming. And jumping to give advice. Oh, you'll feel better in the morning. Just go home and have a night off. Do this, do that. You know, we're adults. We might be going through a tough time. We don't always want advice. Sometimes all we want is to feel heard and someone to just share our stuff with us. And so we feel safe to speak. Know your limits and when signposting to other organisations might be useful. And I think it's really tricky sometimes because we like to think that we can help people we work with, if it's a staff member, a colleague, or even a member of our own homes and, you know, in our personal lives. But unless you're a mental health professional, unless you've had a lot of training, there'll come a point when actually they're going to need extra help sometimes. And it's going to be important for you to go, okay, do you know what, as a friend or as a colleague, I can support you to this point, but I can't get you there. So knowing when to ask for help and being okay with that. Modelling behaviour. So if you feel safe to say how you feel, then you'll notice that beautiful ripple effect where others feel more able to say how they feel. So if you're a manager or if you're in a position of authority and you can say, you know, well, I'm feeling quite stressed at the moment on this project, it's quite tough at times. What you might notice is your staff members going, well, he or she said that, you know, actually I'm feeling a bit stressed too. So there's that ripple effect where you feel more open to share and talk to others in your organisations. Supporting yourself. So this is where, you know, consider where you are on the human function curve. So think, where am I at the moment? Am I sleeping well, eating well, drinking? Okay. Am I exercising? What am I doing? Am I doing those hobbies? Have I done that recently? When was the last time I chatted with a good friend about stuff? And it's that tick box, where am I on it, can help you go, do you know what, I haven't done that for a while. Maybe I'm a little bit slipping the other side. Because if you know where you are, you also know how to get back. Be aware of when your cup is empty and what you need to do to stay healthy. I love this picture. You can't pour from an empty cup. You know, each of us likes to think we can be there for others and support other people. But actually, unless you look after yourself first, how are you possibly going to be there for others? So this is where self-care is not selfish. And I think a lot of people get those confused because for me, for example, as someone who supports a lot of people as a lecturer and as a counsellor and as a trainer, it's really important for me to look after myself so I can be there for others. So looking after ourselves, doing all those things so you stay the right side of the curve will be really helpful. I think, and finally, you know, there's lots of sources of support out there. Samaritans is there not just for people who are feeling suicidal but have got a lot of distress. You can email them if, you know, you don't feel able to have those actual live conversations. Mind is great, especially for those of you at work, because there's handouts on there that you can download which say a lot about how to support family and friends who are going through mental health conditions. So it can be really useful sources of support on there that you can hand out to people and that you can look at yourselves. If someone shares with you, I'm experiencing depression. The NHS website, you can self-diagnose. So if you've got a staff member or anyone in your life that just says, you know, I'm feeling really low, say to them, you know, what would it be like? Invite them. What would it be like to sort of have a look on that website? Do it in your own time and just see where you are on this scoring. It's about 6 or 7 questions, and it will tell you if you might be experiencing depression. And then the BACP, so the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy, you can access a counsellor or the counselling directory, so to get that confidential sort of one-to-one support. Okay, so that was a flyby of mental health conditions. So that's the end of my sort of presentation on that. I was aware that there's some sort of questions and things like that on there. Was there any questions at all that anyone would like to raise before we close up?
Super session. So yeah, if any questions at all, do flag them.
I had a question, Emma, which I put in the chat. I don't seem to be able to raise my hand. Sorry. I wanted to ask about empathy. And it may just be a difference of opinion. I'm working with some psychotherapeutic counsellors through UKCP on a project. That's the UK Council for Psychotherapy. And I know they work very closely with BACP. But one of the counsellors suggested that empathy can be dangerous, and particularly kind of given what we're all going through with COVID, that empathy, you know, in trying to be empathetic and listen empathetically to a colleague, it can bring you down. And she was trying to emphasize this idea of listening compassionately, but without taking on the other person's problems. And I just wanted your thoughts on that as an opinion, whether you would disagree with it, and that approach, really.
Yeah, and I think there's a condition called empathy fatigue, which a person can experience if they're constantly hearing lots of very difficult thoughts and people are sharing a lot with them. And I think when I've gone through counselling training, for example, they talk about resilience and keeping yourself safe so that you can empathise with someone. I like to use the image of climbing down in a hole with someone. I get in there with them, I sit with them in it, and then I get myself back out. And that's the strength, I suppose, you need with regards to keeping yourself safe. And I think it's really important to know when you're soaking up too much stuff from people so that you don't start sinking with it. And I think that comes with practice. But if you're in a situation where you're constantly hearing very negative things, it can weigh you down like you literally are soaking it up too much. For me, I still feel empathy is absolutely vital in any sort of helping work or any listening work. And I think, that listening compassionately, there's very similar things there. But to empathise with someone, it's tough to do because you want to link in with them and understand how they feel. But at the same time, remove yourself so that you can carry on with your own life. And I think that's a fine line, and not everyone always gets it right, because then you can sometimes get this effect of being worn down.
Yeah, no, really interesting.
I think Jill had a question as well. You're on mute, Jill.
Sorry.
There. Okay. I wanted to ask whether you'd seen any distinct pattern in the COVID, either lockdown or post-lockdown time, whether it had caused maybe more depression, or maybe you saw less depression, or anything else sort of very specific. You say, ooh, yes.
I think anxiety is a big thing because there's so much uncertainty. So I've seen a lot more anxiety presenting with regards to uncertainty of when it will end. And I think it was interesting that Mark spoke previously all about the paradox of control. We like to think we're in control of life as much as possible, but actually COVID has taught us that actually we can get a massive curveball sometimes, and that can make people feel that they aren't in control as much as they thought, and they're not in control of when they can go out. So it can raise lots of mental health issues. So personally, I've seen a lot more anxiety during this time than perhaps depression. So that's what I kind of noticed. Okay, thank you. That's very interesting. Yeah.
Super. Well, thanks very much, team. Both teams, actually, both streams. So welcome back, people who were on the other stream. Thanks, still joining. So if you could, if our co-hosts could let them in as they're coming back, let's give them a minute or two. And I will just share the final screens. Oops. So thanks very much for sticking with us. I know it's been a long session, but hopefully, you've picked up some very interesting insights from our leaders at the beginning of the day, almost it seems like quite a long time ago, but some fascinating insights from Paul Hargreaves, Rachel Eden, Bruce from Blake Morgan, and Sean Bierstecher from AAD Digital, and Julia Guy from Santander, and from our wonderful experts in the culture stream and well-being streams. Certainly, as being the host for the well-being stream, tons of ideas there in terms of some practical hints and tips that you could be doing on a day-to-day basis inside your organization to really improve and equip you in terms of understanding concerns that others may have around their mental health and state. So as well as actually improving your own well-being and resilience. So I hope you found both sessions helpful. And we have recorded, we will record these sessions and make them available after editing. So we remove all the sort of video bits and so on up on our website. But at the same time, I would urge you to join the movement. Feel free to join Ethical Reading. It's free. You can sign up on our website. If you would like to have a further dialogue in terms of any of the services that we discussed today, you can explore further on our website. You can drop the presenters an email if you've noted them from their presentations today, or you can send Ethical Reading a note and we can forward it on. We're here to help you to create this new normal. We want to create a community of organizations in Reading that really care about their people, that are compassionate. The workplaces are seen as fair, where people are respected. We want to create a community of organizations in our patch of the UK, which is seen as a go-to place in terms of working and also living. So thank you very much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you again at the next event.